Please be seated, everyone. You want to hang out for a minute? Yeah? You want to come? Yeah. We just a little chat. So let's I was thinking, what is one of your favorite things about St. Luke's? The stained glass. Are you serious? That's what I want to talk about today. That's amazing, isn't it? I didn't no idea what I was going to say, but this is great. So what favorite piece of stained glass? Have you seen a lot of this stained glass before? Yeah, I think that's cool too. So we probably know who those are by now, right? Let's take the center one. Who's that guy? Jesus, yeah. The guy on the right with, it looks like he's got loaves of bread for feet. Who's that? That's Saint Hilary, yes. And then this barefoot guy on the left. Do you know who that is? Saint Luke. I think Peter's over there. In the chapel, there's a bunch of stained glass, and I think those are the evangelists. So, there's a stained glass window of Jesus doing the ascension there. So this is a magnificent piece of art. What do you think about these little windows around this is called the nave, right? What do you think about these stained glass out there? You think they're cool? They're a little abstract, right? They're a little funky. But like that over there, what do you think that is right there? His bed, the manger, right? And then there's the star they follow the star, right? The three kings. And so, do you know why churches have stained glass? What do you think? To make it pretty? Yeah, I think so too. I like it. I heard once that the churches have stained glass because a lot of people who first came to church didn't know how to read. There wasn't all these great schools like you have these days, right? And so the masses that used to come to church didn't really know how to read. And the stories of the Bible used to be in stained glass, right? And so in some respects, each church told a story. And so if you were to look around this church and look at all our stained glass, what story do you think it tells? Absolutely, the story of Jesus. And the story of Jesus from whose perspective? Or from whose thought? The Bible, yes, definitely from the Bible. But what's our name? What's our church's name? St. Luke's. So would you think that all of the stained glass in the nave and here maybe tells the story of Jesus from St. Luke's perspective? Yeah, because there's the stories, there's the reminders of what happens in Jesus' life all around us, right? But Luke also wrote Acts, right? And so we have the second half of the history of the church too. And that's in the windows as well. And Jesus is depicted as what? Everything. He's depicted as a king, right? That's why he has a crown and why he has that orb in his hand. And so Christ the King Sunday is a big Sunday for us, or it should be, I guess. But St. Luke is there, right? And also St. Hilary, who wrote a really important book about the Trinity. You know what the Trinity is? You got it. As one. And that's what he said. And so I wonder if you're looking around that you might maybe find one of your favorite pieces of stained glass and share it with someone in your pew and tell them why. Today is Good Shepherd Sunday. Do you think we have a Good Shepherd window? Yeah. Do you know where it is? More on that later. I'm good to be with you. All right. We'll see y'all. So iconic is a word I think, that we could use to describe this Sunday's gospel text. Iconic. I am the good shepherd is, of course, part of the I am sayings in John, and is perhaps one of the most beloved references that Jesus makes of himself, at least for what it evokes. And I'd be willing to place a wager that each of you, at some point in your life, has held a picture of Jesus sort of confidently striding a mountainside with a lamb around his neck. Right? Everybody kind of knows that image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And as I mentioned, I would bet in almost all mainline Protestant churches is that somewhere you can find Jesus depicted as the Good Shepherd somehow. In case you didn't know, and conveniently they're gone now, but you can find ours, Jesus is the Good Shepherd, behind this door. Now you got to know someone's secret to get in there, the Altar Guild, but I'm sure that door is wide open after service. But if you go in there, there's 2 windows in there that people don't often see, one of which is Jesus is the Good Shepherd, and the other one is David. And he has a harp, and he's playing it. And so, and as I understand it, some of these windows that are over here in the chapel and that are in the sacristy were part of the original windows of the church. There are times when the beauty of these windows do more than just tell a story. And I'm getting to the point where, like, I can look out in the memorial garden and start recognizing, like, the holes in the ground. Like, I know who's there. And so I'll sit out there, and sometime Robert Lonsky will be there. And glorious are the evenings when dusk is just settling in, and the Altar Guild is in there doing their work, or for some reason they left the light on, who knows. But the light from inside shines out through the glass, right? And this garden, this place of holiness, this burial ground, is illuminated in hues of blue and red and gold. And there in the half-light of that hour, with the fountain gurgling behind you, and if you're lucky, being serenaded by a nightingale, I often have a word that comes up for me, and that word is togetherness. Togetherness. I think it's because for me, I can look on either side of that small patch of grass, and I can visualize what happens here each week in this nave of people gathered together in love for Christ and each other. And then the fellowship and the hospitality that takes place in Metcalf Hall. I can hold those 2 images together in my mind. And the fact that most often when we gather together in those spaces, we affirm what we believe together. What we believe together. And the great truth that happens when we begin to substitute we for I in the church. When we substitute we and I. In fact, in this world. And that is that when we do that, even the word illness becomes wellness. I think that's because when the souls are bonded together in worship, there's an opportunity for us to seize the moment to not just enjoy each other's company, but to do as the song says, in worship and praise of our God, to ask ourselves, is it well with our souls? We at least have the opportunity to do that. And that's because I think in some respects we find ourselves in a space that is at once safe, but also urges us to do the hard work we need to do as community. And I think that's because part of the shepherd's vocation, not just the good shepherd, but all of the shepherds out here, is that in these moments we are encouraged to gather around him so that he might protect us and nurture us and nourish us from his grace. He's to do that from what happens outside these walls. But I think in placing him front and center in our lives, it also reminds us of confronting and dealing with some of the unpleasantness that naturally arises from being in community with each other. And John mentions a way for us to do this, right? Because every community is not perfect. In his letter, he writes, "Little children, let us love, not in word or speech." Let's not just play lip service to being in relationship with one another, but let us love each other in truth and in action. In truth and in action. It says that all over in our prayers. Matter of fact, the general thanksgiving says something about that. And by this, he says, and by this we will know that we are from the truth, and will reassure our hearts before him whenever our hearts condemn us. Like there is that part of ourselves, right? For God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. Or if you will, think about how that is in the start of this service. Before God, where all hearts are open and no secrets are hid. And he continues that when we do this work and when we engage in it with all of ourselves, we'll probably come around to this idea that our hearts won't condemn us. Matter of fact, that they do not condemn us. Because of that, we have boldness before God. And that is something that I think is particularly wonderful about Christian community. And I know that you know that it takes a kind of boldness to stay together and to be in community with each other when things get really, really hard. I guess that is why Jesus says that I know my own, and my own know me. And what is more, because of it, I will lay my life down for them too. And we know this because Jesus is not just some third party, right? He's not just some third party who dies for human sin, but in fact is God, and God's own act for human salvation. Thus, as Paul says, he himself has become our peace. Because in some way, when we gather together for worship, when we gather together in each other's homes, when we shepherd each other in love, he has sort of dismantled the barrier that has existed between us. And in doing so, made two groups one in him. And he does this because he is for us. And his prayer is always that we are one as he and the Father are one. In other words, the Good Shepherd accomplished in his flesh both the resurrection and the transition from a world where the rule is it's either us or them, to a world where us and them are no longer separated by a conjunction. Or to take it one step further, a world, a community, St. Luke's, where there is no them, only us. And I think that's essential for us to remember on Good Shepherd Sunday, right? Especially as it relates to shepherds and herds, but congregations and churches, and dare I say, denominations. My grandmother used to tell me that we all work for Jesus, just on different shifts. She was a bishop's daughter, a shepherd's daughter, one who knew her own valleys and where to find still water in the midst of life's troubles. She used to tell me stories of John and Charles Wesley. That's because she was Methodist, over Sunday dinner. And I never forgot what she used to say about her community that she grew up in, way up north in Michigan. And it was a community with a firm understanding that they were to watch over one another in love. They were to watch over one another in love, and to bear each other's burdens, and to celebrate life's joys with each other. And sometimes that's really hard. Not the celebrating. I think we as Episcopalians do that rather well. But I can't count how many times I've had conversations with folks and they look at me and they say, "Nick, I just don't want to be a burden." Well, bearing each other's burdens allows us to fulfill the law of Christ. And so we shouldn't shirk from that responsibility or that duty for each other. In my grandmother's church, they were essentially shepherded by the Good Shepherd, but they were also shepherds to one another, which tells me that how we care for one another is not just something we do because we belong to this flock or that flock, but because we are bound to one shepherd who calls us each by name, and that by recognizing that, the belovedness of each person, that we should do everything in our power to tend to the well-being of those who are given to us to love in this life. Whether that's the family that God gave us or the family that God creates in us through church. Community is what we make of it. At times, it can be the strongest force in our life. At others, it is perhaps the most fragile thing that we know of. And so this togetherness under one shepherd, Jesus, has the potential to be one of the greatest forces for good in our life. But it takes care and engagement for it to truly flourish. And sometimes this care and engagement will have us come face to face with life's disappointments, failures, and grief. And that care, you've probably guessed, that engagement has to do with how we hear the shepherd's voice and listen to his call.